If you have a question for Dr. Donna, please do leave it on my page and I will be happy to answer the question for you. Welcome to another episode of Talking with Dr. Donna. I am your host, Dr. Donna White Carey, and I thank you for joining us tonight. As you know, every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, you have an appointment with the doctor. So thank you for joining in tonight. It's going to be a great session. Tonight is our segment that we call Let Your Light Shine. And we have a fantastic guest tonight, Robin Shine, who has a podcast, 365 Brothers. Our mission here on Talking with Dr. Donna is to build generational health. What does that mean? That means that we're going to pay attention to the generation that you're in, the generation above you, and the generation behind you. And what are we going to pay attention to? We're going to pay attention to 4 pillars of health. We're going to pay attention to our spiritual health, our mental and emotional health, our physical health, and our environmental health. Because I'm convinced that if we look at our health holistically, looking at these 4 pillars in each generation, that we can end the cycle of premature death in the Black community. We're going to revolutionize the way we're thinking about health, and we're doing that right here on Talking with Dr. Donna. So if this is your first time, welcome. And if you are not already subscribing to my channel, please go over to YouTube, subscribe, and then hit that bell icon right next to the subscription button so that you know that when I go live, which is every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, you have an appointment with the doctor. Tonight, our guest on Talking with Dr. Donna is my BFF, Robin Shine, who's coming on tonight to talk about her podcast, 365 Brothers. Now, this podcast is something that you all should make sure to subscribe to before this episode ends. This podcast is about highlighting the wisdom and accomplishments of Black men in America. She's also an author and an educator for 30 years. She has a bachelor's in sociology from Stanford University, a law degree from UCLA. Hey, Bruins in the house. And she is an avid half marathon walker. So you all want to know who I do those half marathons with and why? I do them with Robin Shine. She has just completed her 54th marathon. Let's clap it up. So Talking with Dr. Donna, let's bring in Robin Shine.
Hey, thank you, Donna. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me. Hey, everybody.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for being here. So, as you know, the reason that I wanted to shine a spotlight on your podcast is because on Talking with Dr. Donna, we had done a series called Black Boy Joy. And while we talked about the joy of Black boys and how to retain that joy or reclaim that joy from elementary to young adults to teens, I also wanted to be able to highlight the Black joy of our Black men. And so your podcast fit very nicely into that. So tell us all, what, in your words, is your podcast about?
365 Brothers is a podcast that highlights the lives of Black men, their particular wisdom. It was created in response to or in tandem with the uprising that happened after George Floyd's murder. And really the intention is to show Black men beyond the celebrities, not the athletes, because they get enough press, nothing wrong with that. But really the everyday Black man in all kinds of professions, what they're up to. And I do ask them questions about their experience as a Black man in the United States, about love, and about their interactions with law enforcement, just so that we're not only talking about those who, die unfortunately at the hands of the police, but the much more common situation of the racial profiling and just the hassle of being stopped. So the podcast is about Black men. Hmm.
Hey, I know all you people out there want to hear this podcast. So, 365 Brothers, again, the podcast. So, in talking to all these brothers, I'm sure you've gleaned some wisdom and some understanding about things that you may not have already known as a Black woman. What kind of lessons have you learned from interviewing all of these Black men?
Oh, I love that question. Um, I would say there are like three or four like things that really um, that I learned. Like truly, I was like, what? The first one is really about talk about Black boy joy. For Black men, there is a unique joy at the birth of their children. And it was like I would interview brothers, and then I would say like it would be one of the questions either something that changed the trajectory of your life or what is love to you. And in one of those couple questions, they would talk about, oh, when I was at the birth of my child and watching the first time I looked in my child's eyes, and the first few times I was kind of like, oh, that's so cool. He's so sensitive. 120 brothers, and I kept hearing this over and over again. So much so, by the way, I had to update my question and ask about love in a non-familial setting because these
Mm,
their kids and they love being there. And what I learned was that we talk a lot about the experience, especially among us women, the first time my child was born and I looked
yes,
at right. And I don't have kids, but I still get the world of it, right? And I'm a woman, so I think it's a woman thing because that's who I talk to about
right,
right.
right.
And no one talks about the male experience, how fathers feel
Mm.
upon seeing their child for the first time. And that was a new thing for me. Like I can't even remember how many times a brother had said that before I went, oh, it's a thing. Okay, nobody talks about that. Y'all got a special love for having this. Oh, fatherhood means something to you. That's good to
Yes. That is so cool. And I love that because in the media, we have all of these images about Black men, and there are not a lot of images about Black men enjoying fatherhood or really appreciating the moment when their children are born. Because the media wants us to believe that Black men are not interested in being
know.
fathers, are not interested in being a part of a family. And so just pay attention, all y'all out there listening, to just think about what are the images that you conjure up when you think about a Black male. And I'm going to guess that being a father and kind of really reveling in that those first moments of a new baby is probably not one of the images that readily comes to mind. So I love hearing that.
So another thing is the importance of tribe to Black men. When I ask them questions about their favorite memory from childhood, that question in particular, what comes up so often is either being with extended family. I mean, they're happy with their siblings, but there's a real pattern of brothers talking about the time that their cousins and all the cousins, and
Mm,
even being with those older adults, which you don't expect. Because I'm always surprised when I hear a brother talking about when they were 12 or 13 and how they got to spend time in the kitchen with their grandmother. And that was when they could have her to herself. And
mm,
really they really get a lot of value, and it means so much the time, but not just with family. When I say tribe, once they transition into adulthood, then you hear the brothers talking about having a group of brothers. In fact, this week's episode is a brother who talked about being able to cry with his brothers. These are grown men, and they've just experienced COVID, and he talked about the stress that was on brothers and things that have happened with him, and the value that being with a group of brothers with whom he could be 100% authentic. And that's the theme. They are a tribe of brothers where they can be 100% themselves, 100% authentic. But also another word that comes up with their tribe is being accountable. Like they
mm.
group that's going to hold them to account and like say, hey brother, you know what, are you sure that's what you want to do? And so it's we always think about girlfriends, right? There's so many shows about
Mhm.
girlfriends, Sex in the City to girlfriend,
Yeah.
black or white, Latino, whatever. But we do see some shows about brothers and groups of men, but generally it's always comedy if you think about it. And
Mm.
what I'm hearing from these brothers is that they enjoy having a place where they can really share themselves and be welcomed, held in high regard, and loved, like just straight loved by other Black men.
Yeah. Well, we shouldn't be too surprised because there are fraternities, right? And that is kind of what fraternities are about. But I think that we don't think about when we think about our brothers getting together, we always think that all they're doing is getting together, drinking, laughing, talking about women, trying to plot and plan which woman they're going to get. But it is really refreshing and interesting to think that the Black men kind of have the same needs as Black women or women in general, right? To just come together and have people around you who love you and who support you and who you can be real with. So I really hope that all you out there are listening. If you have a male in your life, encourage him to get out and hang out with the brothers, the good brothers. Now, if he's got, crazy, faulty brothers, let you do that. But if they got good friends, encourage them because they need a
Mhm.
release just like we do. All
Yeah.
right. What else?
Well, this other one was, it's not the joyous side, but it's really important to share. And this thing that I learned, when I started this off, I was like, yes, I'm definitely going to ask them about their experiences with law enforcement because I know they are being racially profiled, and and they did share those stories. But here's what also came up was I was surprised to hear how often young Black boys have a gun from
Mm,
the state, meaning law enforcement, placed in their direction, like either at them, in their face, even. I remember one gentleman, this happened a while back, but he was 6 and he was with some friends at a corner talking about library books. And an officer comes up and literally pulls his gun out to say, y'all need to disperse. And these are kids, right? And so and unfortunately that's not the only, there are too many examples of that from brothers who talk about, having guns put in their face when they were young, like under 16.
mm,
And what I also realized from that question is even the older brothers, the men, when they are talking about being stopped by the police, they will say, there is this this aggregate trauma, if you will. So
mm.
that even if they themselves, because they'll say, well, I'm fortunate, I've never had a negative experience. So, first of all, just think about that. That is a common
Yeah,
thing. Those that don't have a story say, I'm fortunate, I haven't had a negative interaction. That should be the norm, not to be fortunate. But then
right.
they'll say is that, because they know what happens to other Black men, every time they're stopped, every time an officer pulls behind them, there is a heightened anxiety. And
Mm-hmm.
that's from an aggregate trauma. And it doesn't matter if your man, your son, has never had that experience. What I learned from the podcast is that that experience as a possibility is so real that it in of itself carries a sort of trauma.
Wow. Yeah, and that is so hard to hear. I know, it's true. You hear story after story, and you know that, my husband and I, we talk a lot about just his trauma growing up in Oakland, in America, and just the trauma that has in his spirit. Um, and so you hear it, but gosh, it's just really painful when you think about brother after brother after brother having that same experience.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Whew. Yeah. So 365 Brian, if you have not subscribed yet, go to 365 Brothers to hear all of these amazing brothers. What I love about your podcast is that all the brothers are just so different, right? Like there's something different about them. Even though you ask the same questions to all the brothers, their answers are different. You really get at a sense of their personalities, and you really get to hear about Black male joy,
Mm,
right? That's what we want to hear about, Black male joy and the pain of
yeah,
being a Black male in America.
yeah.
Well, I'm going to give you, go
Yeah.
ahead, final comment.
They do. They talk about both. They talk about, the triumphs, the tribulations, and they every brother that I interview, from electrician to Walmart manager to PhDs, they all are like super successful and in whatever career they're in, and they have created joy for themselves. I was just reiterating what you were saying. They really all have joy. So if you want to hear a whole bunch of flavors of Black male joy,
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, I forgot. Well, my favorite question that you asked is, if America were a woman, what would you say? And what kind of responses do you get to that question?
oh my gosh. You know what? And there are certainly some kind of general buckets that most of the answers kind of fit into, right? I have to say, early on, one of my favorites was a guy, one of the brothers, who said, if the United States was a woman, I would ask her for a divorce. Because I have tried and tried and
Mm,
tried, but this relationship has been a problem from the start.
mm,
And when you think,
wow.
I was just so moved by, like, thinking of, I'm the one created the question, but here he is saying, it's been a bad relationship from the start. And I'm like, you know what I mean? So
Right.
so there are those who will say something along the lines of, America, why don't a lot of America, I love you, why don't you love me? Um,
Mhm.
and then I have a lot of veterans that I've interviewed, and I don't want to imply that this is limited to veterans, but I also get a lot of, hey America, I love you, I love what you provide.
Mm,
Um, it's we don't it's weird being you know what I'm saying, American, because everyone talks about, we're a nation of immigrants, so there's this immigrant story, and so there's all this pride.
mhm,
Immigrants from other nations, they chose to be here, right? And so then they go, well, my grandmother came from, whereas with those who descend from, those who were enslaved, it's like we don't qualify as immigrants. We are, though, we're just forced immigrants. But
right.
there is, this is our nation, and so you hear a lot of brothers who say, look, this is my country, um, I love you, I want you to be better, and I know you can be better, and I'm here to be a part of making you better. So those are
Mm.
some major buckets, but you got to listen to hear how they say it, because I can't say it like they say it.
I love that. I love that. We need a divorce. It's just not working out. You're not pulling your weight. Oh, yes. Wow. Well, I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of this podcast. I love it. And I just think that it's such an inspiration for you to even think about doing this podcast and think about interviewing 365 brothers. So I applaud you. Thank you for letting your light shine. And before we close, I have to ask you, how do you let your light shine?
Um, you know what? It's things just like the podcast. I have Donna knows me. I have a love of numbers. Early books were about 30 acts of compassion, and so I would take those on. And then there was some, like, okay, well then I'll take another 30, and then I'm working toward 100 half marathons. That's why, 54, I'm more than halfway there. Um, and I've done 365 poems, 365 doodles, and how I let my light shine is by challenging myself, taking on just new things so that I can expand and grow. And then I try to get everybody I know involved. Donna knows.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's how I got dragged to my first half marathon. But now I like it, so I can't say anything. So
Look,
thank
and let me tell you what I did to her. I said, 50th birthday is coming up. I think you should do a half marathon with me. How was she gonna say no? See, that's how I do it.
That's how she did it. That's how she did. That's exactly how she did it. And then, you know what I want for my birthday, my 50th birthday? I really want you to walk a half marathon with me. How's that a birthday present? But I did, and we had a ball.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for just the space that you provide, not just for me to shine, but when you're doing your show and I see all these guests come on and then highlighting Black Boy Joy, which I watch, it's like, I thank you for highlighting those of us who do that. And I hope you see yourself in the mirror.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for being our guest today on Let Your Light Shine for this segment. We're going to move and talk about a couple of other things. So just hang on in the back.
Say how to find me, and then he can edit that in.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Forgot about that. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. So, Robin Shine, tell us, how can we find your podcast? And if we want to get a hold of you or maybe possibly even be a guest, there might be some brothers out there who want to be a guest on your podcast. How can they find you?
So all the usual places, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc. 365 Brothers. The website is 365brothers.com. You'll find a link for guest information if you'd like to be a guest. We're always looking for brothers. And then you can follow us at 365 Brothers. And you can follow me at All Things Shine. Thanks.
All right. And Shine is SHYNE. That's how you spell that shine versus the shine of this segment, SHINE. But you get that? Let your light shine, Robin Shine. Y'all see how I did that? All right. Thank you, Robin, for being on Let Your Light Shine and for letting us highlight your awesome, awesome work. We're going to move to the food of the month. Here on Talking with Dr. Donna, we are focusing in on our physical health as one of our pillars, and we want to make sure that you think about your diet. And so every month we have a food of the month that we highlight, and we encourage you to incorporate into your diet, not to just eat it for the month and then forget about it, but to incorporate it into your diet. So this month, our food of the month is broccoli. Yay! That wonderful green cruciferous vegetable that's packed with tons of vitamins, with fiber to help with your gut health. And this is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. So broccoli is part of keeping you regular to help you prevent colorectal cancer. So eat your broccoli and make sure that you post it on all my different sites, whatever you make. Post a broccoli salad or post some steamed broccoli or roasted broccoli and let us know great creative recipes that you've made with our food of the month, broccoli, this month. All right, well, that's it. That ends our segment of Talking with Dr. Donna. Let your light shine. Make sure you tune in because you have an appointment every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You have an appointment with the doctor. Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, if you haven't already subscribed, if you found one thing that you liked and heard one thing you liked tonight, go on over to the YouTube channel, hit subscribe and that bell icon, and make sure you get notified every time we go live. Until then, take good care of yourself. Have a great night. If you have a question for Dr. Donna, please do leave it on my page and I will be happy to answer the question for you.